Underworld is one of my all-time favorite vampire franchises because it heavily focuses on both species, whereas the vast majority of vampire universes focus on just the vampires, with the werewolves featuring in the world as temporary enemies but are mostly just secondary characters to what's actually going on with the vampires. As I said, this isn't the case with Underworld. Both vampires and werewolves have protagonists and antagonists, with each of them fighting for something they believe in. I can't tell you how many times I've swayed between favouring the vampires one minute, then wanting the Lycans to win the next. It's just a franchise that delivers a whirlwind of emotions, which is why it's so incredible. I think the story of the werewolves and the Lycans is really well told, with Rise of the Lycans being my favourite movie of the series. I love the scene where the werewolves recognize Lucian in Lycan form and they yield to his command, symbolizing a union between both species. Today I want to talk about the story of the first of his kind, the first werewolf to ever exist, William Corvinus. William is one of those characters that you don't get to see too much of, which creates a mystique around his persona, and I really love that about him. Born in the 5th century, William is the son of Alexander, the first true immortal, and his mortal wife Helena. He is the twin of Marcus Corvinus, the first ever vampire, and together, the brothers form an unbreakable bond, always protecting each other at any cost. William, like his brother, was born with the Corvinus strain in an active state, meaning, like his father and twin, he was immortal. His journey to becoming the first werewolf is one that comes in detail, unlike his brothers, and it changes the course of humanity itself within the Underworld universe. Now that we know William's backstory, let's explore the events that resulted in him being infected with what is now known as lycanthropy. Both William and Marcus were travelling through the Carpathian Mountains when a large black rabid wolf lunged out of the shadows and attacked both brothers. Marcus was attacked first, as his horse was panic-stricken by the wolf's presence as he was on the near side of the attack. William leapt in front of his brother and managed to kill the wolf with a swing of his sword, but not before the wolf managed to bite William in its dying throes. As the bite was through William's chainmail, it was first believed that the wound would not be too great, but both brothers were unaware that the wolf was rabid, the rabies virus already in its saliva when delivering its bite. Marcus took his brother to a nearby inn to have his wounds seen to, as William was initially physically able to move around by himself. As the night wore on, however, William began growing worse, developing an extremely high fever, in addition to uncontrollable convulsions. The Corvinus strain present in William's body reacted as an immune response with the rabies virus and the wolf's DNA deposited by the animal's bite, causing it to mutate, changing William's entire physical composition. He began to sprout hair all over his body, his eyes began to dilate, long, sharp, pointed fangs grew in place of his human teeth, and his jaw, cheeks, and chin all elevated forward to reveal a more wolf-like bestial appearance. His body almost tripled in size and looked monstrous in appearance. William let out a deafening roar from the pain of his initial transition. Before the night was through, William Corvinus had become the first werewolf. William's strain of lycanthropy was extremely aggressive, and he was unable to suppress it in order to revert back to his human form. This was a common trait in all first-generation werewolves. Anyone infected would be condemned to the body of a genetically mutated wolf for all eternity, but were now immortal just like their creator. William's sense of humanity was all but non-existent, with ties to his brother barely holding his feral behaviour at bay while in his presence. As for everyone and anyone else that came across William, that would not be the case. William infected any individual who crossed him, attacking villages and towns across the countryside until he had an army of werewolves at his disposal. His lycanthropy was so infectious that it even revived and infected those he killed post-mortem. Not even death could spare his victims from their fate of becoming a werewolf. It is also believed that those who turned after death had less of a connection to their humanity, as a lot of their brain cells would have died off while they were incapacitated. Now, despite his connection to Marcus, it did little to hamper William's rage as he wreaked havoc up and down the country, with Marcus trying to calm his brother at all costs. Even after Marcus became the first vampire after being bitten by a bat, his powers alone could not subdue William and his horde of wolves. Even their own father Alexander intervened to put an end to his son's rampage, but he also failed with his own attempts. Fearing that the spread of lycanthropy would completely eradicate humanity as a whole, Marcus knew he needed his own army to take his brother down and sought the help of a dying Hungarian warlord known as Victor. Marcus offered the warlord immortality in exchange for the use of his army to capture William, and Victor agreed, becoming the first vampire ever created by Marcus. Victor then proceeded to infect every single member of his army, and henceforth they went by the name of the Death Dealers, trained to kill werewolves in the First Vampire-Werewolf War. A third powerful figure by the name of Amelia was made a vampire in order to aid with the leadership of the army and the capture of William. Marcus now had everything he needed to capture his brother. 600 years had passed, with William evading capture as the werewolf hordes grew in their hundreds. The wolves had an advantage as they had the day to ravage whatever village or town that was in their path, whereas the vampires, highly susceptible to the sun, could only hunt them at night. In 1202 AD, William was finally captured by the Death Dealers, led by Amelia after lingering around the village he had just attacked, something he didn't normally do, which is what made him so evasive. The Death Dealers made sure that William was incapacitated with his capture and greatly wounded him in order to subdue him, something that infuriated Marcus, as his deal with Victor was that his brother was not to be harmed. It made Marcus realize that the army he was responsible for creating was loyal to Victor and Victor only. In order to protect his own self-preservation, Marcus readily informed Victor more than once that should he die, then the entire vampire race would all cease to exist themselves. He used the same lie in order to ensure his brother's survival after capture, with Victor standing to lose every single one of his Lycan slaves should William be killed. Victor truly believed every vampire life were sired to Marcus's line, and every Lycan and werewolf were sired to William's. William was therefore imprisoned for all eternity in a sarcophagus-like cell designed solely for him, with no room to lay down or really move at all. The werewolf could only stand still. A very cruel and inhumane way to spend all eternity, but for William's crimes, Victor justified his own actions. The sarcophagus was locked with a key containing two parts. One part Victor had surgically implanted onto his ribcage, and the other he gave to his daughter Sonia to wear as a pendant around her neck, something she kept safe at all times. William's cell was then hidden behind a trick wall, and the entrance to the chamber itself was flooded by the river that surrounded the fortress. Victor then killed all those involved with the creation of the fortress, the prison and the sarcophagus in order to conceal its true nature. He spared one of the builder's daughters, Celine, and turned her into a vampire due to her uncanny resemblance to his daughter Sonia. Celine would then become Victor's fiercest supporter and most lethal weapon. As far as he was now concerned, William would never be found, and it must always stay that way. William had remained in prison for close to 8 centuries, with all but Victor, Amelia, Marcus and Craven knowing about his existence. This is due to the massive vampire casualties that occurred during the first Lycan werewolf invasion of the vampire castle during the events of Rise of the Lycans, the prequel. Marcus, who was accidentally awakened from his 2-century slumber, as per the agreement of the 3 vampire elders, became a hybrid upon his return to active state. With both Amelia and Victor now killed, Marcus could now finally free his brother from centuries of imprisonment. He retrieved the first part of the key from his father Alexander, who had removed it from Victor's corpse. He then retrieved the second part of the key from Celine and Michael before using blood memories to locate his brother's prison fortress. Marcus made his way to William's location at the abandoned fortress, passing through the flooded entrance before finally standing before his brother's sarcophagus cell. Combining both keys, Marcus unlocked the cell, finally freeing his brother after 8 centuries. William's rage was still intact, and his savage nature was ever present, ready to once again embrace his lycanthropic nature, but he quickly recognized his brother's scent and calmed himself before Marcus, the only being he would refrain from harming. As the brothers were making their way out of the fortress, passing through the old torture chamber, Michael Corvin and Celine met the brothers to stop them both. As Celine fought Marcus, Michael and William entered into a gruesome fight, exchanging blows back and forth, with William showing no signs of weakness despite not feeding for so many centuries. Michael used his agility to gain the upper hand on William, ripping the upper jaw and skull from William's body, killing him. This momentarily distracted Marcus during his battle with Celine, which resulted in his death. Despite his death, William Corvinus is still one of the most powerful werewolves to ever exist. He was the first of his kind, and from his line, the evolutionary Lycan Lucian was born. Lucian had the ability to change back and forth between human and wolf form. He was the only person other than William who could bend the first generation werewolves to his will in order to mount a challenge against Victor and his vampires. Lucian was initially born within Victor's castle, and the two had a strong bond at one point. Let's continue Lucian's journey by clicking the card and discovering his story from his beginnings as a Lycan slave who went on to free his kind. Click the card now to continue the story.